The movie kicks off with a scientist and his daughter Wei, both cursed with ugly scars on their faces. In their creepy home lab, the scientist has been secretly working on something wild. Wei draws a rare flower called a crop flower while her dad brags it has secret healing powers and only grows deep in the jungle. He's tested it tons of times, and finally, he makes a serum to fix his scar. He cuts off a piece of animal skin, rubs chemicals on it, and sticks it to his face. Right away, it goes wrong, super wrong. The skin starts growing fast, like a monster, spreading over his mouth and sealing it shut with gross, oozing sores. He freaks out. He just wanted the scar gone, not this. He slashes at his lips with a knife, but the skin grows back instantly. It crawls over his eyes and nose, choking him. He keeps cutting, screaming through the mess, but Wei just stares, cold as ice. Then, bam! She grabs a knife and stabs him dead. Blood spills everywhere as he drops. She's alone now, broken but dangerous. Many years pass, and Wei has reached her late teens. Wei's smart like her dad and wins a scholarship to a big US university, escaping her dark past. She moves in with her aunt and cousin Angie, who hates sharing her room. Wei sets up a spooky shrine with her dad's photo, treating him like a god. His notes are all around, she's hooked on his deadly experiment. On her first day at uni, she spots a homeless guy with a wrecked face like hers. He shows her the way, and in class, the professor brags about her perfect test score, something crazy rare. After class, Wei tries to take some lab items for her experiments. The professor catches her and asks what she's doing. Wei explains she needs them for her experiments, mentioning her dad was a scientist and she's continuing his research. The professor says taking items isn't allowed, but if she becomes his lab assistant, she can use them. Wei shows him her dad's research diary, and the professor is amazed. Later, he checks his email that reads, his research funding will be stopped in 2 weeks if he shows no progress. Meanwhile, Angie's 2 friends visit their house and start checking Wei's things. They find bloody tools, strange experiment items, and creepy pictures, which scare them away. The next day after classes, Wei notices Angie and her friends hanging out, which makes her feel envious. She thus approaches them and awkwardly invites them to try her father's favorite Chinese food, which the girls hesitantly accept. But when they see Wei eating oddly, they feel disgusted and abandon her there. Wei packs the food, gives it to the homeless man, and talks to him, feeling sad. She tells him the mark on her face makes her ugly, but he says she's beautiful as she is, lifting her spirits. On her way home, she meets the professor, who gives her a ride and offers to help complete her dad's research with a proposal. Wei happily agrees, as he's the first person to support her. The following morning, Wei and Paul study her dad's formula and conclude that there's a missing component, a binding agent to merge skin tissue. They conduct a series of experiments to determine what the agent could be, but all of them fail. Days pass, and they work tirelessly without achieving any significant results. This causes Paul to become increasingly frustrated, and he begins venting his anger on the poor girl, because the research committee has threatened to withdraw the funding unless he achieves a breakthrough in 2 weeks. That day, Angie's friend Alice arrives to apply as a lab assistant, and the professor accepts her. Alice goes home with Wei, apologizes for past behavior, and befriends her. Alice has a poster of the same flower Wei's dad used in his experiments. Seeing it, Wei recalls her father's words about its importance and decides to steal it. That night, she sneaks into a nearby farmhouse exhibition, takes the flower, and brings it to the lab. She begins her experiment, unaware that the professor and Alice are in the next room having the time of their life. Wei takes a section of skin off her thigh and replaces it with animal skin infused with her new formula. Surprisingly, her skin immediately begins to heal, confirming that the experiment has finally succeeded. The professor, watching from a window, is stunned and sends Alice away. He then confronts Wei, who explains how the flower serum made their experiment work. As she shows him her foot, Alice grows jealous and takes strange photos of Wei. and rushes into the room and warns her that sleeping with a teacher for grades is not a good idea. Wei denies the accusations, but Eve refuses to believe her. Scared, Wei leaves her notebook in the lab and left. Paul notices that Wei has left her dad's notebook behind, so he calls a friend and asks for help in translating the Chinese writings. While Alice sends the photos to Angie. Furious, Angie trashes Wei's things. When Wei returns and sees the mess, Angie attacks her from behind. She tries to choke her to death. As an act of self-defense, Wei strikes Angela with a nearby chopstick, resulting in her death. Wei is overcome with guilt and desperately tries to wake Angie, but to no avail. She takes the dead body to the bathroom and comes up with a devious plan. Wei cuts her own face skin and then a layer of skin from Angela's face too, injecting it with the substance. She then puts Angela's skin on her face, causing a painful transformation. When it's over, Wei has shockingly transformed into Angela, and even her scar is gone. Moments later, Aunt Ling returns home, and Wei pretends to be Angela. The naive woman doesn't suspect a thing and hugs her, unaware that her real daughter's body is hidden right under the bed. The next day, Wei arrives at college as Angela and experiences what it's like to have everyone's attention on her. She hangs out with Eve and Jasmine after class, and neither of them suspects anything. In the afternoon, she is picked up by Josh, and the two head for a picnic in the secluded woods. Wei feels incredibly happy because she has never had a boyfriend before. But then, Angela's face suddenly peels off and falls onto him. Panicked, Josh accidentally falls off a cliff to his death. Wei is horrified by the turn of events and desperately searches for her dad's notebook at home but can't find it anywhere. She soon realizes that it is with the professor, but he doesn't answer her calls. Here, Paul comes across a sketch of the corpse flower and eventually figures out the secret ingredient. And rush to the corpse flower exhibition to take some of the flower's parts, although they seem to have rotted. Meanwhile, Wei uses the substance to reattach Angela's face to her own but grows worried as the liquid is running low. Then, she rushed to the science lab and frantically searches for the notebook but fails to locate it. She calls Paul again. Paul admits he has her dad's notebook, but refuses to give back, as he plans to publish it as his own research. This sends Wei into a fit of rage, so she steals some stuff from the lab before departing. On her way out she spots Eve. Wei knows Eve is having an affair with the professor. So, Wei decides to seek revenge on her. Wei then invites Eve to her house as Angie. And as soon as she came, Wei attacked her but Eve managed to escape and hide in the garden pool. But Wei finds her and drives a drill machine into her skull, thereby killing her on the spot. Wei drags the dead body inside the house and proceeds to peel off her own face, and Eve's face as well. The next day, Wei has transformed into Eve and has even dyed her hair blonde to look like her. Two cops suddenly arrive at the house, looking for Angela, but Wei claims she's not here right now. The cops still give the place a quick check but don't find anything suspicious and simply leave. In the next scene, Wei goes to college, where a worried Jasmine reveals that Angela has not been returning her calls, and Josh has also been found dead. Wei also notices several cops in the distance who have been looking for Angela. Later that night, Wei dismembers the dead bodies, puts them in plastic bags, and throws them into the pond. She later sends a message from a fake account to the college, claiming that Paul has been sleeping with a student. Wei even attaches a photo of herself with the professor. The next day, Paul is fired from his position, and his reputation is completely ruined. A while later, we see Paul experimenting with the substance. He applies it to one piece of skin, and it begins to blend seamlessly with another, indicating that he has finally achieved his goal. Paul then excitedly sends a voice message to Eve, informing her of the good news and inviting her over to celebrate. Shortly after, Wei arrives at Paul's home and notices him opening a secret compartment in the liquor cabinet. He grabs some narcotics from there and heads to the other room to prepare drinks. This gives Wei the perfect opportunity to observe the compartment, and she discovers a vial of the substance he created and immediately steals it. But Wei notices that her skin is peeling off, so she pretends to have a headache and rushes out of the house. Afterward, Paul reflects on her strange behavior and checks the compartment. He's shocked to find the vial missing and somehow realizes the girl earlier was Wei, not Eve. Meanwhile, Wei has returned home and painfully peels off Eve's skin from her face. She is soon visited by Jasmine, who is surprised to see her bruised face and the fact that she's wearing Eve's dress. The empathetic Jasmine comforts her and assures her that everything is fine. She then invites Wei to stay with her tonight, which the latter accepts. But then, Jasmine opens the refrigerator and sees several dismembered body parts, right when Wei suffocates her to death. Wei is filled with regret, as Jasmine was the only one who had ever been nice to her. Not long after, Paul arrives at the house and notices Wei curled up in a dark room. She expresses her disbelief that he figured it out, to which Paul boasts that she spent his entire life trying to solve that problem, but it only took him one afternoon. Wei screams that it was her father's work, but Paul is unconcerned and declares that he will make history. He then asks where the vial is, and Wei responds that it's in the fridge. As Paul opens the fridge, he froze at the sight of a chopped head of her friend's. As he stood in shock, Wei injects him with sedative. Later, when Paul awakens, he finds himself tied to a table with his entire neck having been mutilated. Wei then places a piece of meat in his wound and injects the substance directly into it. Then, his skin starts to regenerate at a rapid pace, similar to what happened to Wei's father. It quickly covers his mouth and nose, so Wei shoves a straw through his mouth, allowing him to suffer more. Soon, the neighboring woman shows up on hearing a scream, and is horrified by the gruesome scene, so she quickly runs out of the house to call the police. Realizing she's been exposed, Wei grabs a few belongings, takes the vial of medicine, and rushes out. She runs frantically through the town, but the police quickly spot her and begin chasing her on foot. Shortly after, Wei reaches an underground subway and meets the homeless man, John. She pleads with him to hide her under his blanket, but as she hides under the blanket, she accidentally crushes the vial. The substance spills onto her wound and John's body, merging them into one grotesque form. The scene cuts to some time later, where we learn that Wei is still missing and is being accused of multiple murders. The bodies of Angela, Eve, and Jasmine are discovered, while Paul is in the hospital in critical condition. We then see Aunt Lane, who is devastated by her daughter's death. She later notices someone on the street and calls out, assuming it's Wei, but it turns out to be someone else. Before the film ends, she notices a horribly disfigured figure nearby and flees in panic. It turns out to be the hideous fusion of John and Wei, with unusual placements of mouths, teeth, and fingers. And there the movie ends. Please like and subscribe to support the channel.